The biggest difference that I find is that Korean American food, it's kind of the food that's served in Korean restaurants in America, and the dishes that are more popular here are not necessarily dishes that are really popular back home. I think I've had better sundubu in America than versus Korea.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Here are two classic conversations from This is Taste. Tina Choi is the soul-based genius behind one of my favorite food YouTubes around, Doobydobap. Pierce Abernathy is a trained cook, a big-time TikTok and Instagram creator, and he's been known to model a bit too. These are two of my favorite recent conversations, and I hope you enjoy them. This is your first live in-studio podcast, which is crazy to me because you record so much.
Yes, it is. Most of the interviews that I've done has been over Zoom because I live in Korea and it was COVID. It was weird times, but I like this. I love the setup. It's so professional.
It feels right. I mean, we'll get into why I love Doobydobap so much, your persona, your vlog. I hate that word, but it says something specifically. But I've known about you for a long time from TikTok, and I love so much about what you do as a creator. I mean, I like that you're telling us about Seoul City. I love visiting, and we'll talk about that as well. But you also are really good at cooking. You're so good.
I'm really not, but thank you. I'm honored. I'm blushing so hard, which is such a shame to not be able to see on a podcast setting. But yes, I'm very, very flattered. Thank you for saying those things.
Well, I want to ask you, what makes a really great Doobydobap video? I'm talking about the long form, not the TikTok cuts, but you go sometimes as long as 30 minutes and you talk about how you're feeling. It's really important. And I just wanted to get, how do you think about creating these videos?
Vlogs for me is a bit of a glimpse into my life. So I try and keep it very raw and real. If, the short form content is something that I curate and I have the stories kind of written out, it's edited, I record it over and over so that it's 59.9 seconds for YouTube Shorts. Vlogs for me is like a place where I can be creative and really start experimenting. I feel like vlogs were a baby that, I didn't think that it was going to survive, but it survived. It's healthy and it's just forever going to be my treasure. So it's definitely like my most prized, I guess, creation and something that's the most real.
Yeah, and how, when did you know you had a thing? When did you know this was viable? Was there a theme or topic that you covered in an episode that you're like, wow, this really is resonating?
I think that's kind of difficult because it's difficult for me to answer because I never knew when it was really viable. Even 2-3 months ago, I wasn't sure. I'm always a bit anxious, I don't even know if this is a real job, both, even my parents also, they were apprehensive, even now. But I think for me, it was, I knew it was kind of viable when I started getting really consistent views, obviously, good feedback, and especially when I was walking around New York and people started recognizing me and I would be like,
that's crazy.
Me? And I would get super shy. I think it was just some of those indicators that showed me that, okay, this is actually something, this is a job for me. For me, it was always a means of getting a job, and that's how I started. But sometime along there, it transformed into full-time.
Well, it's interesting. You've hired an employee, you've blogged about this, and you have a clear studio mentality. You're creating content for yourself and maybe brands. But I wanted to go back because this is not just you. You have a whole life beyond the vlog, and it goes back to attending Cornell University. You studied food science, and honestly, I've never had a food scientist on the show. But when I went to the University of Wisconsin, that was my major going into school, was food science.
Okay.
I realized soon after the first week of Chem 103 that I was terrible at science. I had no idea. My education in high school was bad. But tell me, what is food science like at Cornell, and what did you learn? And maybe how did this get you thinking about food in a different way?
I think for food science, there's really like three ways, like three paths, I would say. So there's like food science, the latter half written in italics. And it's really delving into the more sciencey part of it. It's, working in labs, the molecular stuff behind it, like bio, a lot of physics also, also the mechanisms that are related with creating food, and more of like the engineering aspect of it. And then there's food science safety. That's making sure that everything you're eating, everything you're grabbing from the grocery store is shelf stable and safe, and there's no pathogens, so that everyone's happy consuming it. And then there's food science business, which is the more entrepreneurial side, food startups, kind of looking into more consulting aspects of it, how food would be integrated in a grocery store setting, emerging into a CPG, that whole stuff. And I've always been more interested in the food science business part of it. My biggest dream was to have a little stall in Union Square Farmers Market and maybe sell my own kimchi. Like that was my biggest dream.
Wow. When you were up in Cornell, you were
Yes.
coming down to New York and you were like, this is my future. And like, this is like, a few years back when kimchi and Korean food, we'll get into the rise of Korean food in our culture in America. But like, it wasn't as big, right? It was kind of more of a niche thing in a way.
Yeah, for sure. So I lived in Canada when I was very, very young, from third grade to fifth grade. And like back then I was like the only Asian kid in my school, and we had packed lunches. So very much a lot of what Asian Americans have felt. It was very like nerve-wracking for me to always open the lunchbox. But now it's like totally different. Like Squid Game really like helped us. I'll ride that wave. Thank you, Blackpink and Squid Game.
But at Cornell, back to your career there and your time there, when you were studying the business aspect, were you learning to cook? Like, was this something that you were starting to put the pieces together to become a cook that was beyond just like a home cook?
To be honest, no. There was not really like a cooking aspect of it. If anything, I felt more disconnected from food. Like I saw food as more of as a chemistry or a biological aspect, like biology aspect of it, than actually seeing it as an art. And I think that's also part of the reason why I got so drawn into the arts side of it. I cooked during my free time. I've always been fascinated with cooking since high school and from an early age. I think I just always loved food, like just eating it more than cooking it. And I still am. I still think that I'm a much better eater and a gourmet than I am a cook.
Yeah, I think that's most of us. My hand is like raised in the air with that one. Now, you were at boarding school in Connecticut, and you've written about the fact that you could not find Korean food in your town, so you started cooking in your room, your dorm. What were some of the dishes? Were there a few that you were trying to really master during boarding school?
Every week, I would get together all my friends and we would chip in a certain amount, and I would cook for my friends. But honestly, they were kind of my guinea pigs at that point. I semi-forced them, for the sake of our friendship. You need to have my cooking. Like you need to like this. Nothing from then that I'm very proud of. Like a lot of it was just kind of learning how to cook. It was also just like learning how to host as well, and all the different aspects involved with cooking, like plating, or the different temperatures of food was not something that I thought about. I remember one incident where I was making like kimchi burgers, and I put the buns in the oven thinking, oh, it's going to warm up the buns. No, it was super crusty, like
hard as a rock.
It was 2 croutons and a kimchi and like not so melted American cheese on top, and like people did not look happy. But this is what $10 amounted to.
So you were cooking, were you cooking ichiges? Were you doing any kind of large jangal, any large pots in your dorm room too?
I did, but I got way too many complaints from my neighbors, and I was using the common room kitchen as well.
Yeah.
So at some point, we had a very uncomfortable dorm meeting. There's some people cooking a lot in the dorm rooms.
Some people, and they're like looking not at you.
Yeah,
they're like looking around.
No, I was literally just, biting my nails, just like looking to the side. And, like, not me, right? So after that, I tried to keep it a bit more contained. So more small bites and like cold food. That still didn't stop me from like loving cooking.
How'd that make you feel? I mean, having this dorm meeting and having folks like look at you in a different way because of the smell or whatever of you cooking your food of your home, like how did that make you feel?
I think that's when I Obviously I was a bit self-conscious, but in a way I was also very like, you know what, I don't care. This is
Nice.
my food. And that's kind of my mentality for like don't yuck my yum, which was the catchphrase that I ran with TikTok in the beginning. Like that has really set in. Yeah,
Mm.
like when I was younger and a bit more insecure about my food, I would hide, but now like I
Mhm.
am proud, loud and proud. So
No, and I get that from every fiber of your being on the vlogs. I think that you're extremely proud and you're extremely skilled. And I just wanted to know about your background because it seems like you've grown and you've grown into this kind of role as like a real influencer for Korean food in the world.
yeah, it's still very surreal to me. I still don't consider myself great cook. I think there's so many people who cook much better than I do, but what I do best is just like a mixture of these things. Like I can edit, I can shoot, I can
Yeah.
talk a little bit, hopefully. But
Talk about Costco, do your
yeah,
makeup. I mean, there's so many cool things.
yeah, no, it's something that I'm still getting used to. I'm not 100% like comfortable, to be honest. Like there are times where I feel like, oh, like am I doing really a good job of representing it? This is food that I like, but it's not representative of like the most authentic cuisine because I spent half my life in the US as well. So it is very much like a me cuisine, but I wouldn't say it's a Korean cuisine per se. Yeah.
Well, I see your food cooked like in my feed. I see people tagging you in my life, like my friends. I see you tag, like honestly, and I really appreciate that you're identifying this as your cuisine, and I'm interested. And let's get into this conversation now. I want to know Korean food in America, Korean American cuisine versus Korea cuisine.
Mhm.
It's a topic I think about a lot in the books I work with Dookie Hong on, but I'd love to get your take about the difference between the two.
Yeah, it's I think the biggest difference that I find is that Korean American food, it's kind of the food that's served in Korean restaurants in America and the dishes that are more popular here are not necessarily dishes that are really popular back home. Like sundubu, for example, is I think a great example. Yes, very popular in Korea, but not as popular as it is in New York City for BCD Tofu House.
Yeah.
It's not really a hip food that like young people go for. It's a very much an ajosi food, and ajosi is like an old man food.
Hmm.
It's what you go grab during lunch break really quickly during winter because it's warm and spicy, but not really something that people eat on a regular. I think I've had better sundubu in America
Yeah.
than versus Korea, like hands
Oh,
down.
me too. I think BCD in LA and New York. I like Chodangal. They do great Sindubu.
Amazing. I love
Um,
CDG with the burning passion.
It's really great, and I just was there last weekend with my family. I have to ask, is there a dish that is like popping in Korea that maybe hasn't hit here? I mean, we're in the book Korea World. We have a whole section. We're trying to like answer this question, but for you, what's the reverse?
I'm trying to think. I think it's a lot of the more interesting combinations that are like cafe culture, I
Yeah,
would say, is like
fully.
huge in Korea. So cafe culture in Korea is like all about excess. It's overindulgent. It's a lot of butter. And I think another thing that when people are visiting, they're surprised about is Korea's love for butter. Like I use this quote that was used in Bon Appetit a while back, but I think Carla Lali Music said this, but butter is the best cheese. And that's exactly how Korean people feel right now. Like
Hmm.
it's butter with red bean filling on pretzels, and it's called angboto.
Hmm.
And it's probably like the food to get. And there's just butter in everything right now. Like it feels like we almost just discovered it. Like cultured butter, like sweet cream butter. Like Korea's really opening up to butter.
Really interesting observation, Tina. And I agree. My time in Korea, you think, okay, like dairy free, you think the typical East Asian palate and not having a lot of dairy, but it's in Korea, it's on its head. I mean, absolutely, you see it everywhere. Same with the corn dog. And I think that's an American food that has been exported to Korea, but then reinvented in the most incredible, dude, it's like crazy. The corn dogs in Korea.
Yeah, and there's ones that are like just squid ink covered with
Yeah.
a cross section on the hot dog itself. So when it drops in the oil, it like spreads like octopus legs.
Oh.
Like it's very, very creative. Like there's also like powdered cheese on top. It's a lot. I love it personally.
I am not as in love with it. Just for me, I'm just like I personally, it's not hitting me hard. For me, I'm like more into like the deep bench of classic dishes. Like I'm more into like the gamjatangs of the world.
Okay.
Like that to me is like what really strikes like as a food writer and just as a fan, like these old school chiges and tangs and like to me that's like exciting.
Hmm.
I mean that's where I kind of look at it, but I'm certainly not Korean. So I have a different gaze.
I think I like both a lot. Like for me, it's divided into so those kinds of like 감자탕, the ajashi food that I say, is what I crave probably like the day after I drink. Like I need a good soup, hangover soup to really just like cleanse me, and need to be like a little sweaty in the morning just so that the toxins go out. This is not scientific info. Like do not quote me on it, but I feel like it cures my hangover. But the corn dogs, it's like a guilty indulgence for me. Like it's what I crave when I just want to feel a little bit nostalgic. I just have really good memories. Like after school, I would go across the street and order like the corn dogs and the stringy mozzarella. And there's also this thing called fried Pikachus, which is tonkatsu that's really thinly battered. Like we don't know.
Oh yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, we don't know what the meat inside is. Like I still don't know, but it was like around 50 cents or $1 for like the nicer places, and it would be smothered in gochujang, sweet and sour gochujang sauce. And like those are reminiscent foods for me. So I like both. I don't know. As much as I like that OG Korean food, I also love like the junky, like kitschy aspect of it.
Pizza. Is there good pizza in Seoul? I've asked a few folks. I think you know this answer. There's got to be. Well, I'm leading the witness. Is there good pizza in Seoul?
I think that you can find one of the best pizzas in Seoul.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where?
But it's really different types of pizza. Like there's obviously like Korean style pizza, which is a bit thicker. The toppings goes back to kind of overindulgent toppings. Like with the sweet potato fillings and like the cheese crusts. It's a lot, but sometimes it hits.
Is there a name? Is there a pizzeria that I like in Japan? There's incredible Neapolitan style pizza, like Savoy and other places like that are doing incredible pizzas. But I've not encountered it in Seoul, but I know, or in Korea, I know it's there.
Jackson Pizza, I would say. It's like the food that I would order in. And their Greekology pizza, it's with zucchini, eggplant, bell peppers, I think, and onions. I know it doesn't sound that good, but it's different and it's really good. And you also just don't feel like, oh, like I'm eating a pizza. I'm eating a pizza. Like you're getting a few veggies in. So it might be also like a mental thing as well. But definitely like something that I always like crave on a night out even.
I'm gonna check this out. I'm going to Korea as we're recording this in a few days, and we'll get into that. I have to ask you, are you down with some of the other YouTube creators? I mean, I love Wongi, I love Yummy Boy, Sungyuk. I think that's how I pronounce Sungyuk. Are you part of a community of creators?
I'm gonna be honest, I've been a little bit antisocial. It's also interesting because like most of the creators that I know are America-based creators. So yeah, like I know all the LA-based creators and the New York-based like food creators, but also like on the flip side, like Korean creators don't really know about me. Like most of my audience is actually US-based or UK and like anywhere that speaks English. So I don't really
that's interesting.
come in contact, like nobody has contacted me. So.
That's really interesting. So do you roll in Seoul pretty anonymously then? Like relatively anonymously?
Yeah, I would say I am much less recognized in Korea than I am in New York. Like I even got recognized more while I was in Italy versus in Korea. So it's a bit interesting because all my content is in English. So it's a very different market. Like my YouTube analytics, if you look at it, it's like 0.1% Korea.
That's really interesting.
It's very, very, it's like far down in the bottom, yeah.
From a business strategy, I'm curious, have you thought about doing some Korean language videos, or is that something that you're not quite ready to do?
So I did do subtitles for a while, and my written Korean, I would say, is okay. Like, I feel like I've watched the right amount of Korean entertainment shows where I can like use slang and be a little bit hip, but not like 100%. I did try, but I realized it's not like what I'm the most comfortable at, and some of the jokes that I make make are very like punny and based on American humor. I grew up watching mostly Disney Channel, because my mom wanted my English to be good. So
Yeah.
I have all these like American pop references, but I don't have them for Korea. So
Yep.
I found myself pretty like, not being able to really be the best at telling the jokes that I like to tell in Korean. So we'll see from now on. Like if I get if I get a Korean subtitler who is like well versed in both, then we'll see.
I buried the lead when introing you. You're like funny as fuck, dude. You're really
Oh,
hilarious. No, I mean it.
oh.
Like you have punchlines. You have great comedic timing. You clearly have a future in acting, and I think there's definitely some vibe there that kind of would translate. Are you a fan of any American comedies or cooking shows? Like, what about American cooking shows growing up?
I think Food Network was one thing that I watched all the time. Alton Brown has been a very, very influential figure for me. I would have his like Good Eats series on all the time, and
So
I think
good.
that's where my like interest for food science really sparked. Because it was the first cooking show where it wasn't a basic instructional cooking show, but more going into the science behind it. Like I loved science when I was growing up. Bill Nye also.
Oh yeah, shout out Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yeah, also a Cornell
Oh,
grad.
nice.
So Alton Brown was definitely someone that I absolutely loved watching growing up, and obviously Ina Garten as well.
Yeah.
What else? I'm trying to think. But a lot of YouTube, I would say. Like my generation, I would say I watched a lot of Munchies growing up, like Vice, the
Mm-hmm.
more like the YouTube shows as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good mix of both.
Like Chef's Night Out.
Yes,
Great show.
obviously.
Yeah, Chef's Night Out, especially the early days, will go down as like real classic, like classic food TV. And I think it doesn't get as much respect because it's like YouTube. But anyone who's like read anything in a trade or like is looking with like has two eyes open, YouTube is the future of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like clearly.
I agree. Yeah. And for me, like another person that I forgot to say was Eddie Huang.
Yeah.
Was someone that when I first watched him, I was like, wow, this is like an Asian American personality that hasn't really been shown before. And he was going around like showing like New York classics, especially like Chinatown. And the way he writes as well, like I love his writing style. And it's very personal, very like dialogue driven, and I love that. I think that was like one of the shows that also like made me realize, wow, like cooking TV cooking shows can have like different people and like also people from like so many different backgrounds. So that was something that like really kind of had light bulbs going off in my brain. I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is so great. Like
such a great shout out to Eddie Huang. I think Double Cup Love is like such an underrated memoir. It's his story about living in Chengdu, and there's some love and loss in it. And Eddie is a real one of one, and I love his work too. We share that love. Cornell, I have to ask you, Moosewood. Like, did you go there? Is that like a place that you go? I wonder because I know the books.
mm-hmm.
I rarely make it up to Ithaca, so I don't know. Do you go there?
Not really. I don't think I like it's not one of the places that I remember, to be completely honest.
Moosewood not making it into the younger generation. No, the books are legendary, and we published all the books at 10 speed. But I have to get up there. They were like one of the preeminent vegetarian restaurants in America in like the 80s and 70s.
Yeah, no, I remember where it is. It's kind of like in the center of Ithaca, like more closer down. Like it's down the hill. So anything down the hill, like, going down is fine, but then we know that going up is kind of, it's tough. So I would rarely make it down the hill.
No, I know. As somebody who went to school in a great town that was outside of college, I didn't really go to the outside of college part of Madison, Wisconsin. So I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think we always went to like the more grimy places, like Ithaca. I think it was called Wings Over Ithaca, that was like, I would go to the college spots like when I was there. There's actually surprisingly so many Korean restaurants in the college town, in the Cornell college town. I think there's like 3 or 4.
Wow.
It's crazy. There's Coco's, which I waitressed like part-time.
Oh, cool.
And then there is this 분식 place, like for like fast food per se. And then there is another one called Four Seasons. And I think a fried chicken place also opened. And there's
Interesting.
also amazing like Korean style karaoke and bar food place as well. That's a little bit further out, but it's crazy. Like there's so much Korean
That's
food.
cool.
And also like pretty good as well.
Pretty good. Like,
Not like great, but
yeah.
pretty good.
Decent.
It's decent.
Good for a college town upstate New York. So I'm heading to Seoul. I want to know, like, I love walking around, like Songsu, Itaewon. I'm trying to wrap my head around Ujiro and like what's going on there, like those dying shops, electronic shops. But in general, why should we listeners visit Seoul right now?
You should visit Seoul because there's no city like it. It's kind of like what surprises many people when they first visit Seoul is how big it is. There's also so many people and it spreads so large. The Han River cuts through the middle of it. The food scene, like from one end to another, is just so diverse, and you could walk 10 minutes and just go into a completely different part of town. Like you'll see skyscrapers, but then you walk 10 minutes and you see like the old traditional markets. You can see high-end Michelin star restaurants, but you can also see the very run down, run by old couple,
Yeah.
nopos that are just really old school joints as well. And in a weird way, it harmonizes, and I think there's really no place like it.
So well said, Tina. I mean, there is a harmony between the old and new. There's a great turnover every 3 to 5 years. I've been lucky to go several times, and it's unrecognizable in certain spots. Is there like a neighborhood or two that you can mention? I mentioned a few, but that you would recommend we go to?
I think Uchiro is definitely one of my favorite places to go visit because we know that it's going to be gone in a few years. It's going to be all torn down for development in a few years. So I feel like it's one of those places that are fleeting. Like if you go now, it's really now or never. And on top of the great food, you can see that it's also very industrialized as well, but there's also a lot of young people opening restaurants and bars. And now it's kind of taken up by the young community as well. It's kind of cool to go to these old school joints. And we call Uljiro hipjiro, kind of as a mixture of like it's hip and then Uljiro.
It's a cool neighborhood, especially like at night, like the open streets and like some of the stalls there. I mean, to me, having been only a couple times, it reminds me of like Williamsburg in like the early 2000s. I feel the old and new, but we know that it's like or Bushwick in 2005. We know it's going to be gone in a moment, and like we didn't actually know that in New York when like in 2005 it was going to go. But Ujiro, they've been saying for years like it's going to be gone because this is like the electronics shops. Like this is where a lot of Korea's electronics were based, right? Is there like a restaurant you like in Ujiro?
A place that I always go to is a makgeolli place called 7.8, and it's actually run by expat, and he has an amazing selection of craft makgeolli and like really great bar food. And you can also like sit outside, like where all these like printers and like industrial parts of the city is, and it's in a very unassuming part as well. I definitely love going there for icha, which is 1차 is where you first go to eat and drink, and then 2차, I'm sure you know, is where you go for drinks and bar food, and 3차 is where you go for the third round. But this is like one of my favorite 2차 places to go. For 1차, there's so much good food there. I think it's hard to say, but I love getting the baby octopuses there, spicy baby octopus with 감자전, which is potato fritters, very similar to Jewish latkes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that dish. Now, Songsu. What's like Songsu to me felt like Bushwick. It felt like maybe a Brooklyn neighborhood. Is that a cool neighborhood? Or is it washed? Like I don't speak Korean, so I don't know.
I think Songsu is the hippest, like the it place to go right now. Like the cafes are the newest. It's super shiny. All the most Instagrammable spots are there. Like it's right next to Seoul Forest, and Seoul Forest is so beautiful.
Holy cow, it's amazing.
It is so beautiful. Like I run there, and you can get to the water as well. It's just in a great part of town where like the Han River diverges into two, and it's kind of in this little. It's surrounded by two bodies of water, and you walk in. urban and it's also industrialized as well. Like I would divide Seongsu into like the more Seoul forest part of it, which is a lot of cute cafes, very almost like Harajuku vibes, I want to
Hmm.
say. And then more deep inside near Tuksam is more industrialized. You still see like the welders and like auto shops that are slowly getting converted into cool cafes, just like Williamsburg.
Just like Williamsburg and
Yeah.
Bushwick. Yeah.
So, and I think it's the place to be. A lot of great artists also live
Yeah.
there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely
Seoul
visit.
is amazing. We're talking exclusively of north of the river neighborhoods. So let's go south of the river.
Mhm.
And listener, if you stuck with us, you're interested in Korean food and culture. But I really want to dig into Seoul because we don't get to talk about it as much in like U.S. media. I feel like you only hit a few spots. There's a language barrier. There's just not enough focus on it. But I love Seoul so much. So
Mhm.
south of the river, if I'm heading, we know about Gangnam, obviously. But are there neighborhoods that you recommend in the south side?
I used to live near the Seocho area, which
Yeah.
is south of the river, kind of like where it is in Gangnam. But a place that I think surprises a lot of people is Soremae, which was right next to it, and it's really interesting because it's a community made up of French expats, and there's
Mhm.
really great French restaurants, places to hang out, really good organic wine bar. I think Korea is having a big organic wine phase right now, which makes sense because we're so into fermented foods. Like
Yeah.
we love funky and anything with a lot of age and time. So I would say Sorema, definitely go check it out. I am definitely a advocate for north of the river though, because it has more soul
Definitely.
and history. But still, great places to eat and check out.
Thanks, Tina. It's really cool to hear you kind of, detail all these neighborhoods, and I really recommend visiting Seoul. Hit me up on Instagram if you want more pics. I got a spreadsheet. Okay, you're in New York. This section, I want to get a sense of what you're doing in New York and what you're doing in the States. Are you on vacation? Do you have work? What's going down here?
It's half and half. I do have a couple talks here.
Oh, cool.
That I'm going to UPenn for a talk, and then I have something at Cooper Union on the 15th on Saturday. So half for work, half for pleasure. Also to just catch up with friends and eat good food.
Want to hear a little bit about your cooking at home, and I spotted your lazy Susan that you have on your cooktop or near your cooktop, and it has your staples. And I think it really is poignant. It strikes a chord with me about the Korean staples because it's different than what we're going to have in America in some ways. And you detail this in one of your episodes where you give a tour of your kitchen. I spotted grapeseed oil, white pepper, soy sauce, olive oil, kosher salt. Now, why are these your staples? Like, specifically, you're cooking with grapeseed and this white pepper over black pepper.
Grapeseed because it's really great for both hot and cold. And like when I'm doing dressings and because it doesn't imbue such a heavy flavor, I like to have that like clean taste.
Mm-hmm.
White pepper because it's so different from black pepper. I prefer white pepper taste over black pepper. It's a bit more pungent. You don't need as much. And when I'm doing a fritter or when I'm doing something fried, like sometimes I just don't like seeing those like black specks in my batter. And it's just more, I would say it just mixes better also in soups. I don't know. I also grew up eating a lot of white pepper and black pepper mixes, but it's also easy. It's the one that I have I know this is blasphemy, is pre-grounded, but it's really for like a quick like poof.
I mean, listen, we can't always grind our pepper. We don't always have time. And
Exactly.
and our grinders sometimes get dull. No,
Exactly,
not
my
blasphemy.
point.
No, I think white pepper we have a great piece about white pepper that Kathy Irway wrote, and I'll link to them in the show notes because I agree. White pepper, it's something, there's an herbaceousness that's a little different, and sometimes it's
Mhm.
just like an aesthetic choice.
Mhm.
You don't want to see the little ants on your food.
No.
Um, let's talk about a recipe code you want to crack. I mean, you're always testing, and your partner's a chef as well, and you did a great video about a cookie recipe that you had tested with tahini, which I thought was really really banging. So what are you working on? Is there a recipe grail, Tina, that you really want to crack in the next few months?
In the next few months, I've been really getting into makgeolli, and makgeolli is a fermented rice wine drink, and I think I want to really also utilize it in my cooking. We really, really want to make a makgeolli bread. So using the makgeolli as a leavening agent instead of putting yeast, because it has both great yeast and mold. But it is very tricky because it reacts very differently, and it's just like sourdough, except plus like the kombucha aspect of it. So it's quite finicky and it's steamed instead of being
Yeah,
baked as well. It's
cool.
super fluffy, it's white, and just you get that great aroma from the alcohol being evaporated as well. And like the smell is like amazing. We haven't really cracked it just yet. We're testing and seeing like what works best. But definitely makgeolli bread is on my list.
I love the using makgeolli in baking. I think it's so smart as a leavening agent or just as a flavor. I mean, it has like a definitely pronounced flavor that would, send your bread away from Europe and towards East Asia in a cool way, which I think is great. And then milk bread. Have you done milk breads?
Oh, I love milk breads.
Yeah.
Like the tangzong element of it, which is kind of making that glue so that the gluten is really well incorporated. And, it's kind of, I call it the squish test. Like when you squish the bread
Yeah.
and if it comes back up to its original shape, that's when it has passed the test.
Love
And
that.
I think like a lot of the times baking is very it's not something that people go to Asia to eat. Like you don't think that you'll be eating pastries, but there's really, really great Asian pastries and Asian way of doing these classic French baked goods that I think is very interesting as well. So if anyone's visiting Asia or Korea, like definitely try the pastries. I think it'll blow your
I
mind.
agree. I think it's very underrated, especially with a lot of Korean pastry chefs training in Europe, training in the States, and then coming back and being creative.
Yes.
Um, have you been to Burrow ever
I have
in
not.
Brooklyn? A great bakery, European centric, but with Japanese inspiration.
Okay.
Highly recommend.
Okay.
Right in Dumbo.
I'm gonna write that
Yeah,
down.
Burrow's great. All right, so cookbooks. Let's talk about that. I want to get your sense of like your future with cookbooks, but first, as a baseline, are there cookbooks that you have around that you're reaching for, that you're reading for inspiration and influence? We publish cookbooks here at Penguin Random House, so I have to ask you this question.
I don't know if I could say this, but anything from Fidon,
Yeah,
I absolutely love.
you can absolutely say this. That is definitely not our company. No, wonderful answer.
Because it's so beautiful,
Yeah.
and I think it's also like the texture of the cookbooks and just the photography and everything. I love using those as a reference point for the food styling aspect of it. But I like to look at both Korean cookbooks and American cookbooks both. Korean cookbooks more for the technique of it. I like books that are more technique driven than really instructional, so that I can have more creative space when making recipes to utilize those techniques, but with my own twist.
Absolutely. I think it's great when you can merge technique and style. And, the U.S. books have a little different style. Are there any U.S. publishers or books that you're interested in? I don't mean publishers. I'm not trying to have you say anything nice about the building we're in. I'm totally kidding. But are there authors here in the States that you really admire and books that you reach for?
Oh, there's so
So I'm putting you on
much.
the spot, I
No, no.
realize.
I think food writing is something that I'm the most interested in. So I know this doesn't completely answer your question, but one of my favorite classes that I took at Cornell was a food writing class, and it was my favorite class because
Hmm.
over the food science ones, because it kind of opened up the idea using food as a medium to tell stories. And I've always loved the whole storytelling aspect with food, and it's not just a nourishment, obviously. There's so much personal feeling, emotions and history and culture that surrounds it. And I always love to say that it's an edible piece of history.
Hmm.
MFK Fisher, obviously, for the way she writes about food and the emotional aspects of it. Who else? Anthony Bourdain, I would obviously have to say. Just the whole traveling aspect of it and like utilizing culture and kind of like it makes you feel like you're in that place.
Hmm.
I also love Eddie Huang, as
Hmm.
we mentioned before.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's great. You're reaching for some classics there. Some real. I think it's cool to get your read on how you create using cookbooks. Like I think it's something that we talk about a little bit is like cookbooks as inspiration as home cooks, but also cookbooks as inspiration for creators. And what are our reference points? So you're when merging both Korean and American books into your work, it's cool. Okay, so for Doobydobap, what's next? I love this question because I'm really curious. Now, do you have a future in like broadcast or streamers, or are you going to stay on YouTube?
I'm gonna be honest. I would say no to conventional TV. I like the aspect of being being able to have everything under my control. I am a little bit of a control freak as to deciding what goes out. I think I'm a bit nervous to let that be in the hands of other people. Like if I started on TV and then went on to YouTube, I think it would have been a different story. But because I've always been my own editor, I think that aspect of it is a bit scary. And also I do believe that the future is in YouTube
Yeah.
as well for food content. We'll see if there's anything interesting that anyone's listening in and wants to propose to me. I'm open arms, but for now I'm very, very happy like with my community on YouTube. I think we'll see, like in 5 years, maybe if I don't want to be in front of the camera and I want to be on the back end of it, like that would be really interesting to do. But for now, I like YouTube.
What about TikTok? Are you recutting YouTube for TikTok? Are you creating TikTok exclusive? And like it's clearly growing. And I've been talking to my colleagues here and just at Taste, and like it's really hard to compete with TikTok right now when creating. We're trying to teach our readers to cook better and cook smarter and feel comfortable, but man, we can't compete with TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok is a force of its own, definitely. I started out on TikTok and then I converted over to YouTube. As from a creator standpoint, I definitely prefer YouTube just because being able to have a revenue stream from your own videos is very empowering instead of having to rely on brands and sponsorships. So definitely I've been more focused on YouTube. TikTok for the reach that it has and like the people that you can reach. I love both platforms, but and it's important to be present on both platforms, but it's also very difficult as a creator doing all these different things because I do a food blog on the side as well and I like to write and there's other things that I would like to do. So it depends on what kind of help I can get, I think. Yeah.
For sure. It's a bandwidth issue.
Yeah.
It's like you got to focus on a few things and do it really well. What about competition shows? Like, I mean, would you do Iron Chef? Would you do Chopped?
I don't know. I think I don't know. For food competition shows, I think I like watching them.
Yeah.
But I personally feel like I would just be crying in a corner if that were to happen. I like cooking at my own pace as well. Yeah. So probably not.
Yeah, I think that's wise to stay out of the arena. I know you would crush it and you would rise and win. But man, what a stressful thing.
It is very stressful. And I think just, the little things, I think I'd be a little bit too self-conscious, to be honest. But once maybe if I hone my skills down a bit better and I am just more well-versed with also mainstream TV, maybe it'll be something that I consider.
Tina, we asked all guests on the Taste podcast if you could write a cookbook or food culture book without the burden of time, meaning you have no deadline, or the burden of budget, meaning you have all the money in the world. I'm very interested in this answer. Tina, what would that cookbook be?
I would love to do a cookbook really focusing on fermentation and diving into the cultural aspects of Korean cuisine and how it came to be. I think that's something that really fascinates me. And if I were to also delve a little bit more deeper, I think because the last 50 years or the last 100 years in Korean history, it's been so much has happened. Like I say that it's 1,000 years of history that's been just compressed into 100 years. I would love to kind of do a book that delves into the historical aspect of Korea and how it impacted like Korean food. That's something that I would love to do if I had unlimited time and resource.
Yeah, you followed the assignment because it is a huge project. But I mean, even since 1980, what has happened in Korea is an absolute miracle. It's called the miracle, right?
The miracle of the Han River.
Of the Han River,
yeah.
Miracle on the Han. But it has to be said, and especially speaking with you, someone who lives in Korea, the rise of Korean culture in America, it's amazing. And to cover that would be quite a journey.
It would. And I think also, I think the best way to put it is, I don't know if you've read Pachinko, but it's kind of like
Yeah.
Pachinko, how it follows the different generations and the cooking aspect, like, and how like cooking has changed with the different generations. Like, if you just even go, as you mentioned, to the 80s, or if we go back to the 50s, like so much has changed, and like how Korea has gone from really like poor country to what it is now. There's so much to really delve into historically and see how different types of food was cooked.
Do you want to write a book?
I think I do. I used to be very anti-book because I felt like I wasn't in a position to write a book. I was freshly graduated from college, and I've never worked in a kitchen. So I felt uncomfortable with the idea of doing books before, but now I would like it to be more of telling stories. It will be story driven with recipes woven in, but not necessarily instructional recipe, how to make the best kimchi.
Yeah.
I would trust Mangchi with that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Always. Eric, Kim, or Monji, one of the two.
Yes. So I would love to do one that kind of reflects me as who I am. And maybe in 2-3 years, I think I would be ready to do one.
Well, I hope to have you back then or even sooner and talk about that book. Tina Choi, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's cool to meet you in person. I've checked out your TikTok, your Instagram, some of your website content, and I just love your shit. It's great.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like this has been a long time coming. We've been, I feel like, chatting on email for a few months now, and it's finally happened.
Well, you're a busy guy because from the jump, I want to just talk to you and acknowledge, you're a chef, a tastemaker. You're definitely an editorial dude. You worked at BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
You're also a model and an influencer. So we don't have too many. We've had Chrissy Teigen in the pages of Taste, but we don't have too many models on the Taste Podcast. So I just want to know, like, what's it like balancing this really like passionate, hardcore interest in food and cooking with, fashion?
Yeah. I mean, well, first, that feels weird to say outside model. I still don't feel like that title relates to me completely, but I guess it's true. And it's something that has kind of happened through the growth of my platform on social media. So yeah, I was basically kind of scouted online from Instagram by basically a mother agent who has been phenomenal to work with and has just been throwing different things my way that he thought would be a good fit. Usually, I didn't think much of it. And then something happened with Gucci, and last year I ended up walking that show, and we kind of both sat down and were like, okay, maybe there could be something here. This could be, an opportunity. And I enjoy it. It interests me. I like to dress well. I like clothes. So yeah, have been exploring it in a lot of different ways, and have been able to work with fashion brands, not just as a model, but almost as food talent. So that's been really exciting, and kind of hoping to explore that world a bit more.
Well, there's clearly benefits because you get to go to Italy a lot, and that's a pretty great place to go for food. But yeah, to be clear too, you walk, you're runway, you work on runways. You don't necessarily always work in like the catalog or the print advertising editorial world. So you just were in the Spring 23 fashion shows. Where were you at? You were all over, right?
Yeah. So to be clear, I didn't walk any shows.
Okay.
I, was kind of piggybacking off of a trip. I was in Ireland, actually, with Kerrygold Butter, reached out, and I was fortunate to go on a media trip with them.
Oh, sweet. Not SponCon, love Kerrygold.
Yeah, not SponCon, but truly what an amazing trip. We had perfect weather. It was like a group of 6 or 7 of us, and we went all over Ireland, and we saw a bunch of different dairy farms, stayed at some beautiful places, went to Ballymaloo cooking school, if you're familiar.
Famous, yeah, absolutely. What a great school.
Yeah, and was able to meet the team there, have a meal, tour the grounds, and it was truly eye-opening. But decided to just piggyback off that trip, and knowing that Milan and Paris Fashion Weeks were right there, I was like, okay, it could be a good opportunity to maybe do some networking. I had a few kind of invitations to shows and some parties. So yeah, just explored that. I did do like 2 castings. Nothing kind of came about, but it's always good to kind of get your face in front of as many people as possible,
Yeah.
and it's an excuse to go to Italy and Paris.
Yeah, what's that casting situation like? I know there's clearly many more women walking than guys, and it seems like it's challenging to break in. But what's that vibe like?
It's weird. Like, I'm 28, so I'm like ancient compared to most of these models. So for me, it's definitely a bit weird. And you're kind of treated like cattle. It's just in and out. But I've also had great opportunities too, and good experiences. But during the fashion week, it's you're a number basically, and it feels weird. It's not something I love, but I think outside of the fashion week, you're sometimes able to meet one-on-one with people and, develop a relationship, a rapport. And if it doesn't work out that time, maybe they'll remember you for something other.
Absolutely. Well, they're going to remember you because of your TikTok and some of these knife skills that you got, which are dope. I mean, you have really good knife skills, I got to say. Like,
thank you.
A lot of folks on TikTok do not have that. I certainly don't. Let's talk about traveling for your job. Have you found any, or even for pleasure and for tourism, have you found any cities that had like an unexpectedly cool food scene?
I mean, unexpected, I don't know. I mean, I feel like people in food will probably be like, these aren't unexpected.
Nah, man.
But
let's just go there.
I love Philadelphia.
Okay.
I think it's one of the best food cities in the U.S. Like all of Mike Solomonov's spots. Yeah, there's so much great food there, from like, the barbacoa spots to Pizzeria Bianco. There's a ton.
Yeah, like all the Solomonov places. Yeah, I love Philly. Gotta shout it out.
I've been traveling a lot to Copenhagen, and I think that's obviously lauded as some of the best restaurants in the world there. But I think more so the casual food scene there is so great. The cafe scene, the bread scene. They have pretty much at every coffee shop is just bread, butter, and cheese. So it's these like, sourdough buns with beautiful, like tangy, acidic Danish butter and Comté cheese. And it's so addicting. I had one every day I was there. It's phenomenal. Let's see another. Berlin. Berlin has a lot of, great food going on.
That's cool. We don't talk about Berlin as a food city. We really don't.
Yeah.
Ever.
I mean, I'm Armenian, and, maybe a little tricky territory to say, but there's incredible Turkish food there. And Turkish and Armenian food are very, very similar. It's one of the biggest diasporas, I believe, of Turkish community outside of Turkey. So, the food there is so great. And then a lot of great wine bars. A lot of cool chefs doing great things there.
Yeah, you get to travel for your job and just in general a lot. It's cool.
Yeah, it's been a dream. I think this year I've traveled more than, I don't know, the past 5 years of my life.
Yeah.
It's been pretty wild.
Let's step back and talk about growing up. I know you were born in Virginia, but you were raised in Kentucky, Louisville. I'd love to hear about that and what was like food like in your life growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved to Louisville when I was 5.
Proper pronunciation there. I mean, obviously you're from there, but just say it one more time.
Yeah, Louisville.
Yeah, exactly.
As one of my friends, one of my dearest friends puts it, it's like kind of spaghetti is falling out of your mouth. Louisville.
That's a general note on the Midwestern accent that I have kind of broken over the past 20 years. But yeah, the great call. Spaghetti O's flowing from your mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, my mom is from Pennsylvania. Dad is from Virginia. I was fortunate to grow up where my mom would cook for me and my brother fairly consistently, and was, very much adamant on having fairly healthy meals. So I was really accustomed to trying new things quite a lot. There was a point in my life where I got quite picky and I didn't enjoy food. And I feel like, I don't know, some people, at least, I don't know, myself, go through kind of that experience. But my dad's side of the family is Armenian. And so my dad's mom, my grandma, didn't cook a ton of Armenian food, but the things that she did, she passed down to my mother, and my mother would make it. So things like pilaf, things like dolma. I was, we always had that. So, it was, I was always experienced, and always, food was always a part of my life. But, up until, I guess, college really is when it started becoming more serious.
More serious. Are there any Louisville local spots? I mean, Ed Lee, been on the Taste podcast, friend of mine, great chef in Louisville. there's a lot more going on than Ed Lee. Ed Lee is often cited as like the Louisville chef, but what's going on in Louisville?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. The pop-up scene there is really big. One of my favorite spots is Pizzeria Lupo, Pizza Lupo. Shout out to them. They're doing some of the coolest food in Louisville, I think. It's all sourdough pies and a lot of great sides and seasonal dishes. Yeah, that spot is probably one of my favorite. I don't know. There's an incredible Vietnamese population there, an incredible Vietnamese food, like Vietnam Kitchen. Let's see.
Putting you on the spot, telling you like, you know,
Yeah,
no political.
No, I mean, I'm trying to think too. I don't know why.
Have you been to Shirley Mays at all?
Yes.
In Smoketown?
Yeah.
I've been there a couple times. I love Louisville. That place rules. And that place
The hot water cornbread there is phenomenal. So yeah, that spot really, really blew my mind. And I actually lived, I don't know, probably a 5-minute walk. Maybe like a 10, 15-minute walk from there. But yeah, I would go there. I've been there, I think, twice. And I love how the menu kind of changes every day.
Yeah.
They have different specials. But yeah, that hot water cornbread is something like I've never had. It's, you know, rich and decadent and fried and phenomenal.
And I thought the ribs there I had were outstanding. I know they're smoking in the back, I think, but it's an amazing place. And ham hock too.
Yeah, it's wild too, because that building has like a history in itself where, you know, I think Smoketown was one of the first areas in Louisville or in Kentucky after the Civil War that was like, I guess, welcomed to the Black community or free and open. And yeah, there was like a famous jazz bar there before, and then a grocery store, and then Shirley Mays. And it's still like a family affair there, which is so cool.
Gotta head to Louisville again. I haven't been in a minute. You moved to New York and you worked at BuzzFeed, and I'm maybe getting the timeline out of order, but you also worked at Huertas in the East Village.
Yeah. So Huertas came about from BuzzFeed. So BuzzFeed was one of my
BuzzFeed backed.
Funny enough, yeah. So I moved here in 2016 after school. Got an internship at a Vice Media agency called Carrot Creative, which is now defunct. But interned there for a bit. Ended up not getting hired. They closed down their production. I studied film. Was kind of focused in the digital media world. And then got a job at BuzzFeed. And this was right around the time they launched their Tasty vertical.
Heard of it?
Yeah, back then it was absolutely insane. So I was fortunate to work on that vertical and started cooking a lot. So as a producer there, you're not only filming and editing the videos, you're ideating the recipes, you're actually cooking them. So it's multifaceted, and I loved that about the job. I loved that I was doing all these different things. But I didn't necessarily love the food that we made. Like, as many people may know, Tasty is like pretty much over the top, very trendy, viral food. Food that I, to be honest, probably wouldn't share.
I mean, Tasty invented pans and hands, basically. And the viral video. I mean, the recipe video, which is now part of all food media. It's crazy that you worked there so young.
Yeah, I mean, it was eye opening, and you know, we were getting hundreds of millions of views on these videos, which was absurd, and it was such an eye opening experience to learn about viral content and food content and get that experience of what people found satisfying on the internet.
So let's talk about Huertas then. You end up at Huertas working the line, a great restaurant in the East Village, Spanish tapas and Spanish regional cuisine. So you're thrown into the line situation. You did not go to culinary school. What's that like?
Yeah, so at BuzzFeed, I was really interested, got very interested in cooking. It kind of surpassed my passion for film, and I wanted to potentially reach out to a chef owner to cook with. And Jonah Miller, the chef owner at Huertas, read an email of mine, was nice enough to let me come in and basically intern. So I'd go in after work at BuzzFeed and just, do some prep work. And on the weekends, maybe I'd be able to work on Monday. And I did that for about 6 months until I was, they had an open position in the kitchen and I wasn't really happy and didn't see a lot of growth at BuzzFeed. So decided to quit BuzzFeed and end up working at Huertas for about 6 months.
My goodness. So like you're leaving a platform that's giving you a lot of visibility to like become anonymous in the back of a house.
Yeah.
Were you thinking at that time that you were going to continue doing food media as you have with TikTok, or were you just like, I want to cook?
Yeah, I really wanted to cook. I wanted to throw myself, I had no professional experience. At the time, I was thinking about potentially trying to open up a cafe or a spot at some point in my life, which is why I was really adamant about finding a chef owner. But yeah, I had just had such a great time learning and cooking at Huertas, and the team was, we were such a, it was very much camaraderie. It was a great experience, and just decided to take it head on and work the line.
What's a dish that you actually, when you walked in, you had no idea it was so complicated, but when you started making it, it became clear that this was a dish that took an incredible amount of technique, incredible amount of like thought into the sourcing. Is there one dish that comes to mind?
Just technique wise, there was one. It was just a lot of the things that prepared there. I wouldn't say it was simple. It was very technique driven. But I would say the setas with smoked garlic. We like cold smoked this garlic and then pulsed it, and then that sauce itself was just. It had so much flavor and so much depth that I thought there was a million things in there, and it was really just smoked garlic with a little bit of sherry vinegar, and then just seared mushrooms and a little thyme, and that dish was something I would always go back to, and would always kind of crave, especially the raw egg yolk in the middle is just phenomenal.
I love the use of raw egg yolk in Spanish cooking.
Yeah,
it's really, really, really special. Like this place Barmut in Barcelona used to do a raw egg carpaccio amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds so good.
Spanish food is like truly the best.
Yeah. The Basque region is one of my favorite places to travel, hands down. And
so let's go move forward. Huertas, you're humming along, but then TikTok enters the picture. Like you're thinking, because like your videos are great. Like you clearly have a film background. They're not like they're not janky. They're not like rough. They're actually really well edited. I don't mean it actually. I hope you mean that. That's like a positive thing. Like they are good videos, and I feel like you clearly knew what you were doing when you were launching TikTok. You wanted it to be really special.
Yeah, so that all kind of happened during the pandemic.
Okay.
I had moved back to Kentucky and was staying with my parents. They were gracious enough to let me stay there. So I was cooking for dinner for them pretty much every night. A lot of free time on my hands, and was just using that, just cooking. And this was right when the time Reels had launched on Instagram. And basically a friend of mine, we challenged each other to make a reel. And I made a baba ganoush. And I thought it was just such a fun, creative outlet. It, didn't take me a lot of time. I didn't have to be too sacred about it. It could be a little messy. And it was fun. And it got more attention than a lot of my other posts. At that time, during the pandemic, I was thinking about potentially making YouTube videos. But I don't know, as a film major and having that film background, I was never satisfied with anything that I shot. I would just be editing for hours constantly, and just this is just not good enough. So when Reels came about in TikTok, I was like, this is great. It feels kind of like a journal entry.
Yeah.
I can be a little sloppy. This is very fun creative outlet for me. And I'm able to just experiment. So it kind of all started with these dips. After baba ganoush, I did, I think like a feta dip with yogurt, and then just kept going from there. And I think once or twice a week I would just make these, and slowly but surely I started growing more and more, and then branching outside of dips.
That's cool. Yeah, with your hashtag dip content, what are you thinking about? What is your goal with these dips? Because they're rad. I love your dips.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I initially chose dips because I felt like it was one area in cooking that didn't have a lot of rules. As long as the outcome was the texture is good and the taste is good, it doesn't really matter how you get there.
Yeah, I guess it's like fat and salt. Yeah. And then you got a vessel that you got to think about. But yeah.
That's about it. So I would just go to the grocery store and try to find that 1-star ingredient and be like, okay, sweet potato. how do I want to build around here? Do I want heat? Because there's some sweetness. Okay, maybe some peppers. Okay, maybe need a little bit of acid. Okay, fat. Do I want it to have, an olive oil, or do I want like nuts in there, something like that? So just kind of building it that way.
So when you took that job at Huertas, you didn't really have an actual like culinary school background. How did you learn to cook? Because clearly there was a bridge between being a college grad and working in agencies and film to like being good at food. So like, how did you learn to cook?
By cooking a lot.
Yeah, man. Right on.
Just cooking a lot at home. The bug really bit me at BuzzFeed. And, I was cooking almost every day there, trying to experiment with content and food that I, really associated with. But also at home, I was doing dinner parties for friends. Friends had little pop-ups or businesses that wanted to do a party, and I would kind of cater the food. So always practicing that way, where I felt like I was becoming a confident home cook, but by no means was I ready to cook at a restaurant. And that's, what I learned at Huertas was, how to work efficiently, how to, cook 8 chicken breasts at once, how to, cook for a party of 100.
Air traffic control.
Yeah. And it was a completely different set of skills that I learned there.
You bring up dinner parties, which I think is a theme. On your bio, quote, you are researching dinner parties, which is cool. Let me ask you, okay, there was an article in New York Times that like implied that dinner parties are over something. Yes. I don't know. But Pierce, like straight up, what is the status of the dinner party in late 2020?
Yeah. So funny, my friend Emily wrote that article, and she reached out to me, and she was like, "Yeah, the dinner party is over."
Sorry, Emily.
And she
disagree hard on that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I said. I made that statement where I disagree, and her point was that during the pandemic there was I guess not a lot of restaurants open. People had a lot of free time on their hands, and they had their a lot of time to make their spaces feel really welcome, and they wanted to have people over and share that hospitality. And now that things are getting kind of more back into the swing of things, people want their space separate. They want to be able to go out and do things. But I think the dinner party is so special. I think conversations happen at a dinner party that wouldn't happen at a restaurant table. I think there's
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, agree.
I think for me, it's like one of the reasons why I love cooking so much is, I want to share my take on hospitality. And, I can't really do that with these cooking videos. I can't do that cooking for, just my girlfriend or, whatever. I want to host people. I love the idea of being a host, and it's just comforting going to someone's house and feeling that love. Restaurants can do a really good job at that, that great hospitality and great service, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, and let's back up to Emily's article, and I'll link to that in the show notes. I mean, clearly we were exhausted with home cooking, and I think for a certain age group and a certain tax bracket, when dining out is feasible, it's a great thing to do. Like I love going to restaurants. I think like this like blatant statement that like the dinner party is dead is frustrating, because to your point, you don't act the same way when you're invited into someone's home. And then it allows the home cook to actually show some of their skills that they've acquired by reading taste or reading cookbooks. And there's a real pride in making a meal for somebody. I feel like that's really lost when you go to a restaurant. There's not that level of pride in hospitality. And clearly you're a hospitality guy. You wanted to do a cafe maybe, or a restaurant. It seems like that. So my question after that statement, and I'm sorry again, Emily, I disagree. I want to know, what do you have to say about the dinner party? Because you're researching them. Like you're getting all this information. What is there to say?
Yeah, I mean, people have been having dinner parties, since, I don't know, the medieval ages, probably before that.
Yeah.
And they're not going anywhere. They may go in and out of fad, but again, there's something special about dinner parties. There's an atmosphere that is just not similar anywhere else. There's opportunities for friendships and relationships and connections that wouldn't happen anywhere else. There's points of view, and there's discussions and debates that can be had that I feel like are just very conducive to what the environment of a dinner party is.
Great point. I want to know about some of your go-to recipes when you're hosting in New York, or if you're back in Louisville hosting there. Different spaces obviously dictate the menu.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple dishes that you love to bring out for a dinner party.
Yeah. I mean, I always love to start with, kind of some antipasta and cheese. That's, I want people to have food accessible as soon as they walk in the door, and a glass of wine ready if they want it to. So always Castelvetrano olives. I love Basque cheeses, so Manchego, Idiazabal. Definitely some fresh anchovies, some boquerones, like tinned fish for sure.
Yeah.
So there. And then I'm a person who kind of always goes a little crazy with dinner parties. I want to have as many dishes on the table as possible. And a lot of that is based around seasonality. So especially when I'm going, cooking for a dinner party, I'll go to the farmer's market and build something around there. So I'll have, 2 to 3 different salads, definitely a dip or two. And then, I think for me, I love like presentation piece. So like a whole fish.
Yeah,
a stuffed
exactly.
whole fish.
Big whole fish fan here.
Yeah.
Written about it a lot. I love that.
Yeah, so simple. And then, either a grain salad or, something like that. One of my favorite dips to do, which is so simple and do it anywhere, is just labna, fresh turmeric, and black pepper with just a little bit of salt. It's been a showstopper for me, and it's so simple, and I can whip it up in 5 minutes, and it's just on the table.
Yeah, I mean, do you buy labna like just as is in the grocery store, or do you just double strain Greek, or what are you thinking?
I've double strained it, but for me, it's not worth it. It's like especially in a New York apartment.
Real talk, absolutely agree.
You have this huge like cheesecloth hanging from
your fridge,
some cabinet or something, and it's fun to do every once in a while, but it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and putting turmeric and black pepper. That's it. I love that.
Yeah.
It's
so
a beautiful
simple
spread.
And that fresh turmeric has that sweet flavor that dried turmeric doesn't have.
Do you think about like healthy food? Like when that word comes up, I mean, your profession when you are working in fashion, it may require you to be extremely fit, and maybe you have to eat in a way that some would call healthy. I hate to use that word because healthy means many different things. But I guess my question is, do you have like a way of eating? I mean, you're like an athlete, so are you like cutting weight before photo shoots and stuff like that? Or
no, I mean, I would say in general, I like everything I eat for the most part is healthy. Like, and that is my own sense of the word. Like, I also love French fries. I eat French fries once a week. I love ice cream. I eat ice cream. I think it's all about, the parameters that you set for yourself, how often you're eating these things, and ensuring that, there's a diversity in what you're eating, and you're not overeating things that, make you feel bad. But yeah, I think it's all a mix. I exercise. I love to cook with a ton of olive oil. Some people may say that's not healthy. But no, I would say more so the terms around my food would be like seasonal and fresh and like local than the idea of healthy.
Yeah. Well said. I like that. Are there any cookbooks that you're really vibing with right now? Do you feel, are you like synced up with the season with the new cookbooks, or do you have like some go-to older cookbooks?
Yeah, two come to mind. Jess DeMuck, Salad Freak.
Yeah, guest the Taste Podcast. Love Jess.
Yeah, she's great. We've chatted a bit online, but she has a very cool story too of working with Martha Stewart. But I mean, I'm obviously a huge salad fan, and I think what she does in the book is great. And then Andy Baragani's new book is also so fun. I think we have a similar cooking style, and have definitely referenced a lot of his recipes in the past from Bon Appetit when I was, really starting to cook, early on for the first time. He remembers specifically this one of like leeks with walnuts that it was just, I've made probably, I don't know how many times, like, and it's just so simple and so phenomenal.
Yeah, Andy is a great home cook and chef, and he's also been a guest on the Taste Podcast. I'll link to both Jess and Andy's episodes in the show notes. Pierce, we ask all guests on the Taste Podcast, if you could write a cookbook or food culture book without the burden of time, meaning you have no deadline, or budget, meaning you have unlimited funds, what would that cookbook be?
Oh man, I mean, if I could just write any cookbook, that
Right.
that's a big task just to begin with.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm really interested in connecting flavors, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out how to pair different things. So if I could really hone in around, a massive chart of produce and fruit and vegetables and grains and kind of connect the dots between different tastes and figure out a way to form a cookbook around that. So where like the end of a recipe, there's different, okay, if you're making this, you could have X, Y, and Z with it. And just kind of jumping all around a cookbook in that way, I think it'd be really fun.
That'd be exciting to check out. Are you thinking about writing a cookbook? Do you have interest? And this is a hypothetical question, but the first one was, but are you actually going to do it?
I definitely have interest. It's definitely on the table.
Nice.
For me, it's like, a lot of how I think about recipes now and how I cook now is very much like a diary entry. And a cookbook is the complete opposite of that. You're going to take 1 to 2 years to write it and then maybe another year for it to go to publishing. So, it needs to be something that I'm going to still think is my food philosophy and still be relevant 2 or 3 years from now. So it's a bit overwhelming for me, but yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's something that I really want to, take on.
Awesome. I look forward to that. Pierce Abernathy, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
Yeah, Matt, it's such a pleasure.
This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.